Russian leader Vladimir Putin is facing one of the biggest uprisings since the start of the invasion of Ukraine. The address where the voices of rebellion were raised was Bashkortostan, one of Russia's federal republics. As the uprising in Bashkortostan, one of Russia's federal republics, erupts in what is being called the most significant rebellion since the start of the invasion of Ukraine, the political landscape in Russia is witnessing a seismic shift. The country had sent large numbers of troops to the front lines in response to the invasion in Ukraine, with Putin's mobilization order on behalf of Russia. But now, the people of Bashkortostan saw the truth before the elections in Russia and launched a strong resistance against Putin. There is much speculation that Putin's seat of power is in jeopardy because he faces such a challenge before the elections in his country. The uprising challenges the iron grip of President Vladimir Putin, especially as Russia prepares for crucial elections. Putin, who is seeking a fifth term in office, faces the prospect of his long-held authority being eroded by a constitutional amendment in 2020 that could extend his rule until 2036. But the current turmoil in Bashkortostan threatens this prospect, and the secession claims are adding fuel to the fire. However, the enormous uprising in Bashkortostan could cost Putin the election, because Bashkortostan seeks to split from Russia. Let's take a closer look at all the intricacies of this rebellion, which is essential to Russia's future, and what kind of process this crisis will force Putin to engage in. First and foremost, one of the largest rallies ever held in Bashkortostan's Baymak village has started. The uproar is centered on the arrest of local activist Fail Alsinov, who condemned Putin's mobilization in Bashkortostan, calling it a genocide against the Bashkirs. In this protest event, about 10,000 people in the Republic of Bashkortostan took to the streets to support a local activist named Fail Alsinov and express their displeasure with Putin. More than 10,000 demonstrators braved sub-zero weather in Baymak to participate in violent battles with police, prompting the National Guard's intervention. Alsinov has already attacked Putin's mobilization in Bashkortostan, calling it genocide against the Bashkirs, a Turkic ethnic group closely linked to the Tatars who live in the southern Ural Mountains. As a result, the protest for the activists' release, which is critical for Bashkortostan, became extremely intense. This massive demonstration, sparked by perceived injustices and broad dissatisfaction with Putin's governance, particularly his handling of the Ukrainian war, presents key questions. Will the rebellion in Bashkortostan ignite upheaval in other parts of Russia, posing new challenges to Putin's rule? How will this internal dispute affect Putin's tactics and Russia's standing both domestically and internationally, particularly in light of the current crisis in Ukraine and forthcoming elections? According to accounts, thousands of people participated in the violent protests in conditions of roughly minus 20 degrees Celsius, with many hurt. Russian media reported violent fights with police, and Russian National Guard troops were dispatched to help local security forces. Several individuals were detained while demanding the activists' release, and that Russian President Vladimir Putin end his occupation of Ukraine. Many of those jailed had taken part in pro-Navalny protests in Baymak. The investigative committee started a probe against Alsinov after he was denounced by Bashkortostan's leader, Rady Khabarov. On April 28, 2023, the activist delivered a Bashkir language speech at a citizens' assembly in the village of Ishmurzino. According to Media Zona, law enforcement authorities approached Alsinov and another activist, Ilnar Galan, shortly before their speech and searched them. Both previously led the Bashkir organization, which the court declared extreme in 2020 and banned in Russia. This organization's activists pushed for the preservation of Bashkir language study and teaching in regional schools, as well as significant efforts to safeguard the Shikhani Mountains, a natural and cultural monument endangered by industrial development. Tensions in the region rose after the sentencing of regional activist Fail Alsinov, who was sentenced to 4 years in prison for inciting ethnic hate at a protest in Bashkir Baymak, attended by thousands of people. Over 10,000 people gathered at the Baymak courthouse for Alsinov's sentence. People called for the activist's acquittal and release. Soon after, police began arresting demonstrators in a brutal manner. Following many hours of protests, Bashkortostan's Ministry of Internal Affairs launched a criminal investigation into mass riots. Ufa's Kirovsky District Court arrested 6 demonstrators: Yuliy Aralbayev, Radmir Mukhamadshin, Dmitry Petrov, and Denis Skvortsov were sentenced to 10 days apiece, while Ilna Galin received 13. According to eyewitnesses who spoke with the Kushto Bayram channel, law enforcement officers brought in by the authorities began violently dispersing the gathering with tear gas, sound bombs, shields, fists and batons. There were reportedly scores of arrests, as well as violent skirmishes between protesters and police personnel. Bashkortostan protesters threw ice chips and snowballs at the riot police. In response, trucks and buses carrying National Guard troops are attacking the city. In the midst of these fights, the WhatsApp messenger has been disrupted in Russia. Radi Khabarov, the region's leader, stated that people behind the large rallies in Bashkortostan seek to secede the republic from Russia. Khabarov has often declared that he will not accept extremism or attempts to undermine the situation since taking office as president of the republic. Khabarov remembered that activist Fail Alsanov, who was sentenced to 4 years in prison, was a member of the Bashkort organization, which was labeled extreme in 2020. At the same time, Khabarov confessed that he was personally responsible for what happened because the republic's inhabitants were not adequately informed, and the identities of Alsanov and other activists were exposed. Previously, Alsanov's followers accused Khabarov of being the one who reported to the investigation committee. This resulted in a criminal case against the activist and his imprisonment. According to political analyst Abbas Galyamov, the events in Bashkortostan presented the Russian authorities with a new, uncommon type of illiberal protest in which forces frequently responded with force. This insurrection does not imply that the regime has been overturned, but it does indicate that the authorities will have to take harsh measures to calm unrest. This means that many severe grievances will be deposited in the public treasury. It is also believed that at a time when things are going badly for the regime, the load of the accusations that the public will receive and present may become unbearable. All of these repercussions and reactions could mean the end for Russia and its leader, Vladimir Putin. According to sources, Russia's situation is deteriorating rapidly. In addition to the enormous protests in Bashkortostan, a video clip of a Bashkortostan resident has gone viral on the internet. In it, a Bashkortostan citizen urges those involved in the Ukrainian war in the region to quit their positions and return home. Abbas Galyamov, a Russian political scientist of Bashkir descent, was among the first to post the video. The release of this video is expected to influence the decision of hundreds of soldiers from Russian autonomous republics who were dispatched to fight on the Ukrainian front lines under a mobilization order to display courage in this regard. Many analysts feel that for the first time, Russian President Putin is nearing the end of his political career. Of course, this is due to more than just the enormous protests in Bashkortostan and the fact that citizens from Russia's autonomous republics have stopped fighting for Moscow. The true reason Putin's situation is deteriorating is his military, political and diplomatic approach since the commencement of the Ukrainian incursion. Since invading Ukraine, Russia has been battered by Western sanctions. This has decimated the country's economy. As a result of the hyper-economic crisis, the Russian people have suffered greatly. This has also isolated Vladimir Putin in his position of power. He was also isolated on the world diplomatic and political scene. Despite all of this, no one will question him. Under the Russian leader's control, the opposition has been eliminated, and nationalism has emerged as the state's primary ideology. Except for those who were able to flee Russia, almost all important opposition leaders have been assassinated or imprisoned. When Ukraine was invaded, all opponents of the war were imprisoned. Despite all of these bad implications, Putin is attempting to portray an entirely different message because he controls the country's media. Most recently, unverified allegations circulated in Russia that 1 to 2 million signatures will be gathered for Putin. However, it is evident that all of this is a lie, and Putin is pushing the country towards a precipice. The upheavals in Bashkortostan are thought to be just the start of this process. In the coming days, other autonomous republics of Russia may also experience mass protests like the one in Bashkortostan. This revolt will have profound repercussions not only for Putin's political future, but also for Russia's internal stability and geopolitical strategies. As the situation continues to unfold, the world is closely watching how Putin will manage this unprecedented challenge to his leadership. In the run-up to the elections in Russia, we will have to wait and see what the riots will do to the country.